The morning was calm, too calm. For 847 Marines pinned in a godforsaken valley, every second felt like a lifetime. Their ammo was low, hope was lower. They were a heartbeat from being overrun. 100 pairs of eyes scanning the ridges for a ghost. Then a single shadow fell across the sun. An Apache, and with it, the sound of a female pilot's voice, a lifeline in the chaos. This is the story of how Captain Emma Mitchell defied the odds, risked it all, and proved that a woman's touch can be the deadliest weapon of all. The morning sun painted the Afghan mountains in shades of gold and orange, but Captain Emma Mitchell couldn't appreciate the beauty from the cockpit of her Apache helicopter. She was flying her third patrol mission of the week, scanning the rugged terrain below for any signs of trouble. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Rodriguez, was checking the weapon systems when the urgent radio call crackled through their headsets. Viper 17. "This is Groundhog Actual," came the strained voice of Major Tom Bradley, commander of the 2nd Battalion Marines. "We have 847 Marines trapped in Grid 42 SMB on 3456780. Heavy enemy contact. Request immediate air support." Emma's heart rate spiked as she processed the information. 847 Marines was almost an entire battalion, far more than she'd ever been asked to support in a single operation. She could hear the distant sound of gunfire through the radio transmission, punctuated by explosions that made the static worse. "Copy that, Groundhog. What's your situation?" Emma responded, already banking her Apache toward the coordinates while Rodriguez began powering up their weapon systems. "We're pinned down in a valley. Estimated 200 enemy fighters on the ridge lines above us," the major's voice explained. "They've got us surrounded on 3 sides, and the only way out is through a narrow canyon pass, but it's covered by machine gun nests and RPGs. We've got wounded who need immediate evacuation." Emma looked at her fuel gauge and weapon loadout. She had enough 30mm ammunition for a sustained fight and 4 Hellfire missiles. The mountains below grew larger as they approached, and she could see smoke rising from several locations. "Jake, contact base and request additional air support." "We're going to need backup for this one," she ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. As they crested a ridgeline, the full scope of the situation became clear. Below them, hundreds of Marines were scattered across a valley floor, taking cover behind rocks, abandoned vehicles, and whatever shelter they could find. Muzzle flashes sparked like deadly stars from the surrounding hills as enemy fighters poured fire down into the trapped unit. The Marines had been conducting a routine patrol sweep when intelligence reports indicated a high-value target was hiding in a remote village. What was supposed to be a simple operation had turned into an ambush of massive proportions. The enemy had used the terrain to their advantage, waiting until the Marines were deep in the valley before revealing their positions on the high ground. Emma could see the narrow canyon path Major Bradley had mentioned. It was barely wide enough for vehicles to pass through single file, and enemy positions commanded perfect fields of fire across the entire opening. Several destroyed Humvees at the entrance showed that previous escape attempts had failed. A broken watch lay in the dust beside a vehicle, its hands frozen at a time that no longer mattered, a silent testament to the ambush. "Groundhog Actual. This is Viper 17. I have eyes on your position," Emma said. "I count multiple enemy positions on ridge lines to your north, east, and west. The path to your south appears heavily defended." "Roger that, Viper. We've already lost 6 vehicles trying to punch through." Bradley's voice came back. "My boys are running low on ammunition, and we've got 23 wounded who can't make it out on foot. We need that pass cleared or we're going to be in serious trouble." Emma studied the tactical situation carefully. The enemy had chosen their positions well, with interlocking fields of fire and good cover from air attack. But she noticed something that might work to their advantage. The machine gun nests guarding the pass were positioned to fire down the canyon, which meant they had limited ability to engage targets approaching from above and behind. "Jake, I'm going to need you to mark targets on the northern ridge first," she ordered. "We'll work our way around and hit the pass defenders from their blind spot." "Copy that, Emma. Laser designator is hot," Jake replied. "First target is the heavy machine gun position at grid 345789. The Apache shuddered slightly as Emma fired the first Hellfire missile. The weapon streaked through the air, leaving a thin trail of smoke as it guided toward the laser designation. The explosion echoed through the valley and one of the enemy positions disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. But even as they celebrated the successful hit, Emma could see more enemy fighters moving into position. This was going to be a long fight, and those Marines were counting on her to get them out alive. She had trained for moments like this her entire career, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of responsibility she felt, knowing that 847 lives depended on her actions in the next few hours. The radio crackled again with updates from the ground. Viper 17, you got one of them, but they're repositioning. I'm seeing movement on the eastern ridge and they're bringing up what looks like anti-aircraft weapons. Emma's blood ran cold at the mention of anti-aircraft weapons. Her Apache was tough, but it wasn't invincible. A well-placed surface-to-air missile or even heavy machine gun fire could bring them down, leaving the Marines with no air support at all. Jake, keep your eyes peeled for any missile launches. We need to stay mobile, she said, pulling the helicopter into a sharp climbing turn to avoid presenting a steady target. Down in the valley, the Marines were fighting for their lives. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson had been in combat for 3 tours, but he'd never seen anything like this. His squad was pinned behind a cluster of boulders, and enemy rounds were chipping away at their cover with each passing minute. Corporal Davis, how much ammo do you have left? Thompson shouted over the gunfire. 2 magazines. Sergeant Martinez is down to 1, came the reply. Thompson looked around at his men. They were good Marines, but they were vastly outnumbered and running low on everything they needed to fight. The wounded were being treated by Navy Corpsman Lisa Parker, who was doing everything she could with limited medical supplies. Sergeant, we need to get these wounded out of here soon, Parker called out. Johnson's lost a lot of blood and Williams has shrapnel near his spine. They need a real medical facility. Above them, Emma was engaging her second target, another machine gun nest that had been harassing the Marines' eastern flank. The 30mm cannon on her Apache roared to life, sending high explosive rounds into the enemy position. She watched through her targeting system as the rounds found their mark, silencing another threat, but for every position they destroyed, it seemed like 2 more appeared. The enemy had clearly planned this ambush for weeks, maybe months. They had backup positions, plenty of ammunition, and the advantage of high ground. Viper 17, this is Falcon 26, came a new voice over the radio. We're a flight of 2 F-16s inbound to your location. What do you need? Emma felt a wave of relief. The cavalry was coming and she could really use the help. Falcon 26, we have multiple targets on the ridgeline surrounding a valley full of friendlies, she reported. I'm marking priority targets now. While Jake began designating targets for the incoming fighters, Emma focused on the immediate threat. The anti-aircraft weapons Major Bradley had mentioned were now clearly visible on her targeting screen. 2 Zu-23 anti-aircraft guns had been moved into position on the eastern ridge, and she could see their crews preparing to engage. Those guns are going to be a problem for everyone, she muttered, adjusting her approach angle. The key to helicopter combat was staying unpredictable. She varied her altitude, speed, and direction constantly, never giving the enemy gunners an easy shot. Her third Hellfire missile streaked toward one of the anti-aircraft positions. The explosion was spectacular, sending pieces of the gun flying in all directions. But the second gun crew had learned from watching their comrades and immediately opened fire on her helicopter. Incoming, Jake shouted as tracer rounds streaked past their cockpit. Emma threw the Apache into a diving spiral, using the terrain to break the enemy's line of sight. The helicopter's armor could stop small arms fire, but those 23mm rounds would punch right through if they found their mark. On the ground, the Marines watched their air support disappear behind a ridgeline, leaving them feeling more vulnerable than ever. But Major Bradley knew that the Apache pilot was doing exactly what she needed to do to stay alive and keep helping them. He clutched an empty wallet, a token of a life far away from this valley, its emptiness a reflection of their current desperation. All units, this is Groundhog Actual, he broadcast on the company net. Air support is still active. Keep your heads down and conserve ammunition. We're going to get out of this. His words were meant to boost morale, but Bradley knew their situation was getting desperate. They'd already been fighting for 4 hours and his men were exhausted. The wounded were piling up and their ammunition supplies were running dangerously low. Emma brought her Apache back above the ridgeline, now approaching the second anti-aircraft gun from a completely different angle. Down in the valley, Major Bradley was trying to organize a breakout attempt. The airstrikes had reduced enemy fire significantly, but the pass was still heavily defended. He gathered his company commanders around a bullet-scarred Humvee to discuss their options. Gentlemen, we have a narrow window here, Bradley explained. The airstrikes bought us some breathing room, but those cave positions are already coming back online. We need to move now or we're going to be stuck here all night. Captain Rodriguez from Alpha Company studied the canyon pass through his binoculars. Sir, I count at least 3 machine gun positions still active at the mouth of the pass. Plus, there are probably RPG teams we can't see. What about casualties, Doc? Bradley asked the senior Navy corpsman. The wounded, sir, the corpsman replied. 15 can move on their own, but 8 need to be carried. We'll need vehicles to get them out. Bradley nodded grimly. Moving wounded through enemy fire was every commander's nightmare. But they didn't have a choice. Alpha Company will lead the assault on the pass. Bravo Company will provide covering fire. Charlie Company will handle casualty evacuation. Above them, Emma was engaging the cave positions one by one with her 30mm cannon. The high explosive rounds were effective against personnel, but the rocky positions provided excellent protection. She would suppress one position only to have another one open fire minutes later. Jake, I need you to start calculating our fuel consumption. How much time do we have left? She asked. At our current burn rate, maybe 25 minutes before we have to head home, Jake replied. But if we keep using the cannon this heavily, it'll be less. Emma made a difficult decision. Contact base and tell them we need immediate replacement. I'm not leaving these Marines until another bird is on station. Roger that. Base, this is Viper 17. Request immediate Apache replacement at grid 42 SMBB 12345678890. We have 847 friendlies in contact and cannot abandon station. The response was not what they wanted to hear. Viper 17, nearest available Apache is 45 minutes out. You are ordered to return to base when fuel reaches minimum reserve levels. Emma gritted her teeth. Military orders were clear, but so was her duty to the Marines below. She would stay as long as physically possible, regardless of what the manual said about fuel reserves. On the ground, the Marines were beginning their breakout attempt. Alpha Company moved forward in short bounds using every piece of cover available. Staff Sergeant Thompson led his squad in a flanking movement to the left side of the pass, hoping to get close enough to take out one of the machine gun nests with grenades. The enemy response was immediate and fierce. Machine gun fire swept across the canyon floor, forcing the Marines to take cover. RPG rounds exploded against the canyon walls, showering everyone with rock fragments. We're taking heavy casualties, Captain Rodriguez reported over the radio. Need immediate fire support on those cave positions. Emma didn't hesitate. She brought her Apache down to just 50 feet above the canyon floor, flying directly between the canyon walls. This was incredibly dangerous flying, but it was the only way to get the angle she needed to engage the cave positions effectively. Jake was amazed by her flying skills. Emma, we're below the ridgeline, he said. If there are any other anti-aircraft weapons, I know the risks, Jake, but those Marines need us right now. Flying at such a low altitude between the canyon walls required split-second timing and perfect control. One mistake would send them crashing into the rocks, but it also meant the enemy couldn't get a clear shot at them from above. Emma opened fire with her 30mm cannon, sending rounds directly into the mouth of the first cave position. The high explosive rounds bounced around inside the cave, creating devastating effects. The machine gun fell silent immediately. She pulled the Apache into a sharp climbing turn, popping up above the ridgeline just long enough to engage the second cave position with her last Hellfire missile. The missile disappeared into the cave entrance and exploded, collapsing part of the cave mouth. That's 2 cave positions down, she reported to Major Bradley. You should have a clear shot at the pass now. But even as she spoke, Emma could see new enemy fighters moving into backup positions. The enemy commander was smart and had clearly planned for losses. This fight was far from over, and her fuel gauge was getting dangerously low. The dusty road below, once a symbol of the Marines' forward motion, was now a choked, cratered testament to their desperate struggle. The Marines' path forward was not only blocked by the enemy, but also by the heavy cost of every inch gained. The hope in the valley was a fragile thing, battered by the constant pressure of the surrounding forces. With her last Hellfire missile expended, Emma was down to just her 30mm cannon and whatever creativity she could muster. The fuel gauge showed 15 minutes of flight time remaining, but she had made a promise to herself that those Marines would not be abandoned. Major Bradley's assault force was making progress toward the canyon pass, but the enemy had revealed new positions that Emma hadn't seen before. Hidden spider holes and carefully camouflaged bunkers were coming alive with machine gun fire as the Marines advanced. The silence was gone, replaced by the relentless grinding sound of a fight that would not end. "Jake, I need you to spot targets while I focus on flying. Call out anything that's shooting at our guys," Emma ordered as she brought the Apache into a wide orbiting pattern around the valley. "Contact. Machine gun position 2 sighting about 300 meters up the eastern ridge," Jake called out. Emma rolled the helicopter and brought the cannon to bear. The 30mm rounds walked across the rocky slope, silencing the enemy position. But immediately, another gun opened up from a different location. Down on the ground, Staff Sergeant Thompson had managed to get within grenade range of one of the remaining cave positions. He pulled the pin on a fragmentation grenade and cooked it for 2 seconds before hurling it into the cave mouth. "Fire in the hole," he shouted. The explosion echoed through the canyon, and the machine gun that had been firing from that position went silent. Thompson's squad immediately moved forward, knowing they had to take advantage of every small victory. Corporal Davis was right behind him when an RPG round exploded against the canyon wall just 10 feet away. The blast knocked both Marines down, and Davis felt something warm running down the side of his face. "Thompson, Davis is hit," shouted Private Martinez. Thompson crawled over to his wounded Marine. Davis had a nasty gash on his forehead from rock fragments, but he was conscious and could still fight. "I'm okay, Sergeant. Just a scratch," Davis said, wiping blood from his eyes. "Stay close to me, Marine. We're almost through this." His words were a fragile promise, a desperate hope against the reality of their situation. Above them, Emma was running into a serious problem. Her 30mm cannon was running low on ammunition, and without missiles, her options for dealing with hardened positions were limited. But she had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Jake, what's the blast radius on those cave positions?" she asked. "If I could get a direct hit with the cannon, depends on what they're storing in there," Jake replied. "If they have ammunition or explosives, it could be significant. Why?" Instead of answering, Emma dove the Apache toward the largest remaining cave position. She was going to try something she'd never attempted before. A diving gun run directly into the cave mouth. The maneuver required her to fly the helicopter almost vertically downward, firing continuously as she dove. If she misjudged the distance or the timing, they would crash into the mountainside. "Emma, what are you doing?" Jake asked nervously. "Trust me," she replied, concentrating entirely on her flying. The Apache screamed down toward the cave entrance, 30mm rounds pouring into the opening. Emma could see muzzle flashes inside the cave as enemy fighters returned fire, but she held her course until the last possible second before pulling up. Her gamble paid off. The continuous stream of high-explosive rounds had found something volatile inside the cave, and a massive secondary explosion rocked the entire mountainside. The cave entrance collapsed completely, sealing off one of the major threats to the Marines below. The earth itself seemed to groan in surrender, a great plume of dust rising into the air, a final exhalation of the enemy's presence. "Holy cow, did you see that?" Jake exclaimed, but there was no time to celebrate. Emma's fuel warning light had just come on, indicating she had less than 10 minutes before she would be forced to land. Major Bradley was reporting new problems on the ground. Viper 17 were taking fire from positions on the western ridge that we haven't seen before. "They're hitting our casualty collection point," the major's voice stated. Emma looked toward the western ridge and could see muzzle flashes from at least 4 different positions. The enemy had kept these weapons hidden until the Marines were committed to the assault, and now they were threatening the wounded Marines who couldn't defend themselves. The dust on the ground where the wounded lay was being kicked up by a new hail of bullets. Navy Corpsman Lisa Parker was treating wounded Marines behind a destroyed Humvee when machine gun rounds began snapping overhead. She threw herself over Private Johnson, who had a chest wound and couldn't move. "Somebody needs to do something about those guns," she shouted. Major Bradley was faced with an impossible choice.